नमस्कार, सत श्री अकाल, आदाब। मैं ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਦੋਸਤ ਤੇ ਹੋਸਟ ਜੋਲੀ ਗਰਗ ਅੱਜ ਪਿੰਡੂ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਬਾਰੇ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 14 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਮਤ ਨੇ। ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਰੂਲਿੰਗ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਨੂੰ ਯੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਓਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਨੂੰ ਨੋ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇੱਕ ਡਿਸਕਲੇਮਰ ਦੇ ਦੀ ਜੀ, ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਚੈਨਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਸਮਰਥਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਨਾ ਹੀ ਵਿਰੋਧ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਮਾਧਿਅਮ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੱਕ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਉਦੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਬਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਹੱਥ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ। ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਕੰਪਲਸਰੀ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਯੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਨੋ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਹ ਵੋਟ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਦਰਜ ਕਰਾ ਸਕੋ। ਜੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਕੰਪਲਸਰੀ ਵੋਟਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੋਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਫਾਈਨ ਵੀ ਪਵੇ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਵੈਲਿਡ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਰਸਲ ਵੋਟਲੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ MLC ਨੇ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਆਫ ਸਾਊਥ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਅਤੇ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਨੀਲ ਐਂਡਰਿਊਜ਼, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ 21 ਸਾਲ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ MP ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਨਾਲ 7 ਸਾਲ ਉਹ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਕੈਨਬਰਾ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਜਾਣਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੀ ਮਤ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਕੀ ਉਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਯੈਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਜਾਂ ਨੋ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਸਰ।
Thank you very much, Charlie. Good to be here and welcome to your viewers.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Russell, as we see, there's a referendum happening. This happening on 14th of October, right?
That's right.
And we saw so many signs out there which is saying yes. So this is just about yes and no, right? Tell us a little bit about the referendum and why the Labour is backing up, to be this, need to be yes.
The referendum will be, the vote will happen on the 14th of October, on Saturday. It's a simple question. Mm-hmm. Do you support recognition of our Indigenous people in the Constitution? Mm-hmm. And do you support giving them a voice to Parliament? Now, the voice to Parliament is about members of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders electing their own people throughout the country. Yeah. Remember, a lot of these people lived in very isolated areas, and they will then meet a number of times a year, and they will look at all the legislation that come along, and they'll be able to then make a decision amongst themselves and have their representatives from that group approach the government, the agencies, the Parliament, to tell them how that may affect them.
Okay, yes. And I believe no matter who is doing a speech or any program which is happening, first and foremost thing, everyone recognize their land, their present, past and future, isn't it?
There's no dispute about that.
Yes.
They are the custodians, they are the first in this land.
Yes.
We've only been here just over 200 years. Yes. So it's a bit of a shame that it's still not recognised in our Constitution. Okay. Secondly, whatever is happening with our Indigenous people, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, it's not working. Yeah. They have the they have a very high infant mortality rate, the highest in the country. Yeah. They live about 8 years less than the average Australian. Okay.
Due to the poor health or any genetic issues or what?
No, poor health.
Okay.
They're being looked after because a lot of them live out in remote areas. Yeah. They've also, a 16-year-old boy has more chance of going to jail than going to university. Now, you as a member of the Indian community, you've come to this country to give your family and your children better opportunities. Yes. These people don't have those opportunities. So giving them their own voice is a way of giving them that opportunity and having their own say to Parliament.
In the Parliament. So when you say to having their own voice in the Parliament, do you that mean to be having their own member of Parliaments and so that they can put any agendas and stuff like that in the Parliament?
No. Parliament will be in control of its own destiny. Parliament controls itself. Okay. They will only have the ability to talk to Parliament. Now, Parliament then, or the government, then they make the decision whether they accept it or not. Yep. So it's not about putting them in Parliament They have to go through the same elections as myself and everyone else, same system. This is just to give them the ability to have their voice heard.
You mean you want to say they will be recognized, will not be, so if they want to go in a parliament, then again has to go through a process. There will not be a separate committee for them, right? And whereas, like Liberal is saying, they are already being recognized and there is no need of to being their committee. So what is this committee?
They're not recognised. They're not officially recognised in our constitution.
Okay.
They only got the vote about 50 years ago. They only got the right to vote 50 or 60 years ago.
Okay.
We have always looked upon our Indigenous people as not as full human beings, you know?
Yeah.
We've got a terrible history of how we've treated our Indigenous people.
Yeah.
It is time to actually say, look, we acknowledge you've been here for 65,000 years.
Yes.
We acknowledge you're the first inhabitants of this land.
Sure.
And we recognise you in our constitution. Now, it's not. They're not asking for a lot.
Sure.
This all came about a very big meeting at Arora.
Mm.
They had thousands of Indigenous people attend Arora, and it was, I believe, it was unanimous that they called upon for constitutional recognition. They called upon for a voice, an elected people from them to give a voice. So these are democratically elected people, not to go to Parliament, but to be on an advisory committee to advise the government.
Sure.
Now, I don't see what is wrong with that, considering the fact every year we spend billions of dollars and we're not getting the outcomes are still not good.
So, what advantage, let's say if this referendum happens to be yes, what advantage that community will have in a simple words?
They will then go through an election process where they elect representatives throughout the country, and those people will then be a part of the advisory committee. And they will then advise the government on issues that affect them.
Yep. And if this happens to be no, what threat or what disadvantage you see to their community?
Nothing changes. They'll still have the highest mortality rate. They'll still have the kids, 16-year-old boys, will still be having a bigger chance of going to jail than to university. Nothing changes. Infant mortality, nothing will change. The same old will keep going. We now know it's not working, so let's change it.
Yeah.
Let's look at something different.
Labour is being in the power for a few times, right?
Yeah.
Already. Why is this now? Why is not being done at the first place or second place or third place when the Labour was in power?
Because the Uluru statement was only a few years ago. So it's not a long term. It's only a recent thing.
Yeah.
And they've asked the Parliament, they've asked for the people of Australia to recognise them in the Constitution and to give them a voice.
Okay.
So it's Labor who has taken up the mantle and is pursuing this. Now I'll also tell you that, Jolly, that a lot of Liberals support this as well. A lot of Liberals.
Okay.
They've got they had one particular member of the cabinet resign, so he can go in and support the yes.
Okay.
So there are with 4 premiers in Tasmania, Liberal and Labor, have got together to support the voice.
Okay. So
It's important to hear this.
Yeah.
Ken White, an Indigenous member of Parliament, is supporting it.
Okay.
Liberal supporting it.
Okay. Because they are Indigenous people, that's why they're supporting, or is
they're not all Indigenous people, because they believe it's time to recognise. And they also believe that what we're doing at the moment is not working. We have to improve the outcomes. The best way to do it is to listen to them.
And there was one more thing important, because when we go out on the roads, especially in South Australia, especially in Adelaide, you see many hoardings or that, the core flutes are only from saying yes. There's no much advertising material from the Liberal side which is saying no. Why is that?
Look, I don't know what's going into their thinking at all. But I will say this: the no campaign. It's I've always said all my life I've represented people, and I've always tried to be positive for them. But I've always acknowledged it's far easier to do nothing. It's far easier to support nothing than actually supporting actually supporting something that's going to be advantageous to the country. It's so easy. The reality is that that the yes is about positive, about love, about hope, about improving their lot in life. The no is about don't change, no change.
Now, where you think this campaign is going? Like, do you think this happens to be yes, or how strongly you believe this will be in the favor of Labour?
I don't think anybody will know the result until the ballot's counted. It's very close. I still believe there are a lot of undecided voters. I still believe many of them will start focusing. Many may be on the way to the ballot box. We're hoping that, look, I've always had confidence that the Australian people are always believe in a fair go. And hopefully, as they're driving the ballot box, those undecided voters will decide to support the yes vote because it is moving forward. It's always about looking to the future. So, we'll find out the answer on the 14th.
On the same day, you reckon?
I think, well, it's a plain yes or no. So it shouldn't take long for the results to come in. I believe we'll know exactly the sort of numbers that are coming in on Thursday night, Saturday night.
Again, that's very important thing, sir. Is it a compulsory vote?
It is compulsory, and there will be people who don't turn up to the ballot box without a good reason will be eligible for a fine of $20. But it's not the $20 that worries, the fact that you're actually down as not voting. So you'll get a letter from the Electoral Commission. It's better.
As a responsible citizen, you should vote. This is what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, this country, we have compulsory voting throughout this country. We have a good democracy. And people want to come to this country because it's such a good democracy. All we don't ask a lot of people. Be productive, be a part of our society, and vote for our members of Parliament. Vote in our referendums. I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to go out and vote.
Good. Thank you, Russell, for joining us. And first thing, like how this started and where is this started? Who are these people, like to bring this on to this stage when the referendum is going to happen?
It started off at a very significant, very large meeting of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders at Uluru.
Is there any Labour Party members or leaders involved in that as well?
Well, there would have been, yes, I don't know who exactly, but this was organised. It was, the decisions were made by Indigenous people, not by anyone else but Indigenous people. And it was a massive call out to the Australian people, please recognise us in the Constitution and to give them a voice, to be able to represent their people.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks for joining us today.
To
be telling us why this Labour is being supporting this referendum. ਦੋਸਤੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਰਸਲ ਵੋਕਲੇ ਜੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੱਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਵੌਇਸ ਹੋਵੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਂਦ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਰੱਖ ਸਕਣ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਕਗਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਇਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਜੀ, ਐਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਊਜ਼ ਰੱਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ। ਹੁਣ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕਾਲ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰਫ ਯੈਸ ਜਾਂ ਨੋ ਕਹਿਣਾ। ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ 14 ਤਰੀਕ ਨੂੰ ਹੈ ਜੀ, ਸੈਟਰਡੇ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਕੰਪਲਸਰੀ ਵੋਟਿੰਗ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਨਿਕਲੋ। ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੀਰ ਭੈਣ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨ ਨੇ, 18 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਨੇ, ਵੋਟ ਦੇ ਹੱਕਦਾਰ ਨੇ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੋਟ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵੋਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰਫ ਯੈਸ ਔਰ ਨੋ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ। First of all, thank you very much, sir. Welcome to the channel, and thank you very much for giving your valuable time to talk about this. And so would like to know, sir, about the referendum and what Liberal like to say to the Punjabi community and to the world, to the all the Australians, why they are not supporting, like they want to say no, even though we can see everywhere there is signage. I don't know, I haven't seen any sign on the roads saying no. So maybe the Labour has put their money or they in the hole in their pocket to put the signs up. So how it is, you please explain us about it.
First, let me say your thanks is going the wrong way, because I should be thanking you for this opportunity to share what I believe is the useful direction for Australia into the future. And it is fair to say that the Liberal Party has taken a no rather than a yes stance. But I must also point out that a number of members of the Liberal Party will be voting yes.
Okay.
So in the Liberal Party, people are free to vote as they feel compelled. That's quite significant. And I think you mentioned, the dominance of yes signs relative to no signs. But in fact, the resources for this, there have been much more resources available to the yes case because the government is promoting the yes case, whereas all of the resources for the no case have had to come from people prepared to make donations.
Yes.
The government have in fact represented both sides, but there have been more resources available to the yes case, not just through the government, but through its associates, such as the union movement.
Fair enough. In a simple layman language, Neil, if we like to understand, like when Liberal Party is saying no, it means they're not in the favor of the Aboriginals community to be the part of the parliament, right?
Not precisely. The Liberal Party has already offered to introduce legislation so that this voice could exist under legislation. The Liberal Party, or individuals, not the individuals, have actually said, look, we favour having Indigenous people recognised in the Constitution. A statement in the Constitution that recognises Indigenous people. What we don't favour is changing the Constitution so that Indigenous Australians have a separate committee identifying solely with them. We're saying this is divisive. We don't offer this facility, for example, to the Sikh community. We don't offer it to any other recent arrivals from Australia. We do say to Aboriginal people, yes, you should be recognised in the Constitution because you are the first Australians. But we already have, as I'll illustrate in a moment, a number of institutions exclusively representing Indigenous Australians, and we don't think we need to change the Constitution for that.
Fair enough. But isn't that be contradict your own opinion? Because, like, say, one side you guys say yes, they shouldn't be recognized, but now Labour is trying to give them one step forward, so they can be in the chair to be able to take some step and out some decisions or so. So this is it not that contradicting within their own Liberal Party's views?
No, absolutely not. First, the Liberal Party is saying you are free to vote as you wish in this referendum, as is always the case.
How come the Liberals, we see that?
Sorry?
How come the Liberals, we can see everywhere saying no? So this is a simple yes or no thing, right? So the voting is not like a member of parliaments or the other voting.
3 or 4 names.
Yes, it's not like that. It's a simple yes or no, right?
But that is always the case for the referendum, because every referendum change is simply a question of yes or no, not over a number of people. We are not electing representatives to a voice. We are saying to Australians, do you want to change the Constitution so that Indigenous Australians can have an organisation called The Voice? We are saying, yes, we do want Indigenous Australians recognised, listed, but not to set up a separate committee.
Isn't that look like because, let's say, this is their home. Australia is considered as a land of Aboriginals, right? Whosoever, like the ministers, or even any small to big committees happen or meetings happens, we always recognize the land of Ghana peoples and even the Aboriginals people as well, right? And doesn't matter, like either that Labour's meetings or the Liberal meetings or any party meetings, they always recognize Aboriginal people. But now when the Labour is trying to help or not to help, let's do just one ladder up, and the Liberal is saying no, they should be recognized. Again, my question is again to you this, isn't that be too complicated for public to understand? One side Liberal is saying yes, they should be recognized, but they should not be in the committee. Isn't that be like why if people would not understand that?
You surprised me with that question, because I would have thought the yes or no is really a very simple answer.
Yes.
Either you are in favour
Or
you
not.
are not in
Yes.
favour.
When you say
It's
yes,
or no.
Liberal is saying yes or no. So how can be? It should be no or yes, right? So how can this Liberal is saying either you vote yes or no? Means you understand what I mean?
But how else could I deal with a referendum? It is only one
It is. But as you said, like Liberal is not saying only no. Liberal is saying yes as well, right?
Some Liberals, yes.
Some Liberals. So it's we can see that it's fairly it's not it's a very weak point of Liberal as well. So Liberal is trying to be very even-handed, right?
No. The Liberal Party has always said that the most important person in Australia, in voting terms, for the Parliament or for a referendum, the most important person is you. You make that choice. We, the party, don't dictate that choice. We say that is your choice, and to be fair to the Labor Party, this is a secret ballot. They will never know how their members vote either. So one of the strengths is this capacity to make a choice.
Yep.
And I am one of those who is saying, look, I was 21 years a member of the Federal Parliament, and in that time I sat on a committee called the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. Right? It exists, it's always existed, well, let's say for 60 years or more, I can't be precise. And the Aboriginal Affairs Committee existed solely to be a voice for Indigenous Australians. So as a member of that committee, I travelled to northwest and Western Australia and tramped through the asbestos mines at Witanoo, because we wanted to say, how do we clean this up to meet the demands of the local community? As a member of that Aboriginal Affairs Parliamentary Committee, I chaired the Maralinga review of the atomic test site at Maralinga and said, how do we clean this up so that Indigenous Australians who were forced off could now have that access once again, and all we did was listen to their plea and respond to it. Now, there were other things we would like to have done. The trouble with atomic fallout research, you can't do everything you want to do, but it would have to say this was a bipartisan committee, Labor and Liberal, talking to Indigenous Australians. And sorry to go on, but in my own electorate of Wakefield, I represented 2 Aboriginal communities. One on York Peninsula at Port Victoria, and one in the Riverland at Gerard. And I regularly visited them. I was their voice. Now, it's not good enough for me to be a voice, because they are entitled to be the voice. So what happened at Gerard, for example, at their request, we spent $500,000 building a yabby farm. And I'm sorry to go on with this, but at Port Victoria, we spent $500,000 building a crayfish farm. In every case, we did exactly what the community wanted. The community spoke to us, and we did it. Sadly, if I took you to both of those sites now, there is no evidence.
It was even exist, is it?
Pardon?
There's no evidence of?
No, of it. $500,000
Gone.
And the other place, same amount, gone. In spite of the fact that we acted entirely on the advice given by the community. And in spite of the fact that the state government and the federal government, both sides, gave every support. But that advice wasn't always heeded. Sometimes it was seen as patronising. But they had a voice, straight in, right? And it didn't work as it should have. Now, I'm sorry to go on about this, but what was much more important was to make sure they had adequate health and education facilities. And so at Port Victoria, for example, we built, the taxpayers, at their request, built a health administration facility. But the next thing we had to do was actually ensure that there was a barrier around it, because it was being vandalised. And at Winky, Gerard, the children went to the Winky school. 90% of the Winky primary school population was Indigenous. But the principal not only made sure they had breakfast at her expense every day, She had to drive her car there, probably illegally, to pick them up because they hadn't come to school. You know? So we're saying, what do we do? Here, the Berry Council, here is a voice, and it's not being heeded.
Yeah.
Now, I'm saying, having a voice is not what's needed. We already have that. I was on the committee that was that voice. And I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you now, but not only did we have this bipartisan committee, we also had, of course, an organisation made up exclusively of Indigenous Australians as their voice to the Parliament. And there's been a number of those committees. The most notorious of them was a committee called ATSIC, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Committee.
Yep.
Right? And it collapsed. Why did it collapse? The Parliament didn't want it to collapse.
Who is responsible for that to be collapsed?
The corruption of that committee. I'm sorry to say that,
Yep.
but in fact there were court cases involving the chair, and finally, and the Liberal Party was in power at the time, and finally the Labor Party and the Liberal Party both looked at this and said, what can we do? This committee cannot continue. Huh? And key Indigenous leaders said, you're right, we can't go on, this is corrupt through and through. Now, so it was disbanded, and a group called the, now this is after my parliamentary time, National NIC, it was set up to replace ATSIC, the one that was corrupt. Every time one of those committees has imploded in any way, it's been replaced by another committee. And the criticism of, and I'll stop at this and give you a chance, the criticism frequently labelled at the Parliament is that if you don't put this in the Constitution, the Parliament will eat it away.
Yeah.
I challenge you. Give me one instance in the last 60 years where the Parliament has ever acted, the Parliament, not both sides, has ever acted to disadvantage Indigenous Australians. Find me one piece of legislation enacted by the Parliament in the last 60 years that has ever disadvantaged Indigenous Australians. If we need a new voice, put it into legislation. Because if ATSIC, the dreadfully corrupted one, had been in the Constitution, what would we have done?
Let's say after the referendum that results comes in yes, what disadvantage you can see in the long term? And of course, if the other way around, if it is become yes, so what advantage will be for the community and for that Australians will be, you know? So please tell us.
I promise this will not take as long.
Yeah, no, please. Yeah.
No, but in fact, my dilemma with a yes vote is that suddenly I have placed in the Constitution the building block of Australia. I have placed in it a voice, a committee, solely for Indigenous Australians. I am happy to place their recognition that they were here first. Yes, that's how I will vote. But I will not vote to establish a committee solely for Indigenous Australians. That committee can be established by legislation. And it won't be divisive then.
What will
It
happen?
will all be the same.
What threat or what disadvantage you see? You know, this is just to saying this should not be a committee. What if the committee happens? Then what do you think? What challenges is going to come up for the Australians?
The question, this is where there are so many things unknown. And I know the no case has been saying, if you don't know, vote no.
Yeah.
And people have been critical of that. But that is the dilemma. I don't know what the power of this change would be when what I'm establishing is a committee. I do know that a committee in being legislated could be then effectively represent Indigenous people. As I said, it would be much more effective if for example, ATSIC had been in the Constitution. As I said earlier, what would we do? We do not, the opposition, my opposition and the opposition is opposition to a constitutional committee for just one group of Australians. I will set aside this one group of Australians, Indigenous Australians, first arrivals, and recognise them in the Constitution. I'm not doing that for any other new arrivals. And that is what I ought to do. but not to establish a committee which is part of the Constitution.
Let's say if the referendum happens to be no, and of course you said they should be recognized. Apart from recognition, what else benefit you can see they're gonna get it? You know, because we are replacing something here. Liberal is on the other side, saying like, you know,
Some liberals.
yes, and so then some liberals. So then what other benefits they're gonna get it, and what advantage they will get it?
I'm 79 years of age.
Okay.
In my 79 years, the dramatic change I have seen is an improvement in Aboriginal relations.
Okay.
Right? We now have 11 Indigenous members of the Federal Parliament. That's a huge voice in itself.
Yep.
A huge improvement in my lifetime. The attitude of Australians to Indigenous Australians has improved.
Yeah.
If we vote no, we're actually saying this is what will continue to evolve, a better and better Australia. We are closer to one Australia in 2023 than we've been at any time in my lifetime. So the advantage of being no is that we no longer have, we don't encourage a divided Australia, we bring in Australia together. The problem with the yes vote is that I set Indigenous people apart. I want them in the Constitution, but I don't want to set them apart with a separate committee. I already have that in the Parliament and in the own Aboriginal Affairs Committee that we have, and in the changes that I've outlined in this interview.
All right, so thank you very much. I think we got a lot for today, and thanks very much today taking your time. And ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਜੀ ਨੀਲ ਜੌਨਸਨ ਜੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਐਜ਼ ਆਈ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਬਿਫੋਰ ਕਿ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਫਰੋਮ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ 21 ਸਾਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਬਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਕਿ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਇਸ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਦੀ ਹੱਕ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੁਦ ਡਿਸਾਈਡ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਹੋ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਦੋਸਤ ਜੋਲੀ ਗਰਗ। ਨਮਸਕਾਰ।